Hello, everybody. My pleasure to be with you all again. Sorry we couldn't come together last weekend, but sometimes I have to take a weekend or two, weekend or two off. Just finishing a little snack right there. I apologize. But, you know, sometimes we do these shows for normally 2 hours. Welcome, by the way, to Christian Witnesses of Jah, live discussion number 39. We usually start with a little pre-discussion, and then we happen to be in the middle of a series discussing the angels of Jah in the book of Genesis. We've already completed a series of videos on the angels of Jah in the book of Zechariah. So now we're doing that in Genesis. When we're not doing a series like tonight, we basically just pick a theme that is typically indicated by the thumbnail. And then we also have some pre-discussion. We partake of the emblems, the bread and wine, after each Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion show. Unlike the Watchtower Society, we partake. We don't see any basis in the New Testament or the Bible as a whole for identifying Christians as a group of people that couldn't possibly be here yet in order to prevent them from being a group or part of a group, anointed Christians, that is here. So, however, those of us who've come from Watchtower know that it does make sense the way the Watchtower has constructed their interpretations of some prophecies, and it makes sense on a surface level is what I mean to say. But over time, if you're really thinking about these things, not every person, just like not everyone in every church goes to the deepest extent of things like the Trinity or other things. Well, not everybody in Watchtower thinks as deeply about things, or it's always on their mind. Maybe later something will come up, some issue, and it'll make them more interested. But there's not like this ever-present deep dive into every single thing Watchtower. Some people, right, like people online, Watchtower apologists, they're like that. But there are a lot of people in Watchtower who really do believe in God, the God of the Bible, the one God, the Father, Jah, they call Jehovah, which we accept as well as a acceptable pronunciation of God's name in English. So, nevertheless, we do share the same God. We do care about the divine name, us, Christian Witnesses of Jah, Watchtower. And we promote basically the same Jesus, some differences, and the golden rule. So, but outside of that, right, Watchtower has a lot of rules and things you have to follow, basically everything. Or you're out, or they don't consider you a Christian, right? They'll literally condemn you to hell or Gehenna, right? The worst place you could go. So as we know, though, the great crowd isn't even here yet, even according to Watchtower's interpretation. Well, of the account in Revelation 7, right? But they do identify the great crowd as people in the organization since the 1930s. So they've kept them in this state of mind where they actually are displaced, right? They're mentally, spiritually displaced into thinking they're a group that even the people who are telling them they're this group doesn't believe could possibly be here yet, because it happens after the Great Tribulation. But they just don't mention that, right? They let the great crowd continue to believe that's who they are. So they're basically already past Armageddon in one sense, right? Because the great crowd comes out of the tribulation. So if you're the great crowd, you've already gone through the great tribulation. In one sense, you're the great crowd, but you're not. You understand? So we do partake, Watchtower people, those of you who do tune in, but who don't really like some of the things we do. And I know a lot of you don't really like to support any of the Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion because, you're bothered by it. You're loyal to Watchtower, I understand it, many of you, not everyone, but a lot of you, without Watchtower, I don't think you'd even care about the Bible, based on the way you act otherwise. And, if it weren't for Watchtower, I don't know what a lot of you would do. That's why I tell people who are trying to help witnesses who are still loyal to the Watchtower, I say, hey, be careful, right? You don't know what could happen if you prematurely, to use Jesus' illustration of the wheat and weeds, you try to pull up a good-hearted person from Watchtower too soon, and the only reason they're really there is because they're kind of going along with everything. They're not mature enough to stand on their own yet. You might prematurely damage them. So in any case, though, everyone has to ultimately decide. Still, we want to be cautious, right? So it's likely that most people in Watchtower today will wake up at some point. Many, especially as we get further and further away from things that could even potentially be a fulfillment of what they say. You know what I'm saying? So it's game over at this point, though. And the further we go, the further the game is over. So a lot of people may start to wake up more and more, but they're going to need an example. We try to provide that. We don't just do it to provide an example for them. We do it because we believe we're Christian. And we want to promote the God of the Bible. Right? We believe in Jah. Right? We believe in Jah. We've done videos. We have discussed evidence, not only of Jah, the one God, the Father, the eternal life that gave life to life, and that is a scientific fact. Both the fact that it's life that gave life to life and therefore has to be eternal, and that life is intelligent based on all the life that came after that. So, we've discussed these issues. We've discussed the historicity of the Bible, the biblical accounts, the flood, all of it, the creation stories. Just go take a look. We're talking about the angels in Genesis now, but we've discussed all of these important accounts. Tower of Babel, Sons of God. Speaking of which was our part 2 in this series. Now in part 1, I encourage you to watch all of the parts because we, in addition to talking about the subject texts, we talk about a lot of stuff. Sometimes, like I said in the pre-show, like just now and before, we're going to do a few other things, but once we get started, once we get into Genesis, we're going to do chapters 14 and 18 tonight. We're not going to read all of it. We're going to read sections of it, that deal with angels of Jah in that book of the Bible. Now, of course, we're in December and I'm getting close to the end of the year. And I missed last week because there's just a lot going on, as many of you, I'm sure, are experiencing. I do plan on doing at least one other show, one other live stream before the end of the year. CW Jah live discussion number 40. And I'll try to do another text reading. We're going through Proverbs right now. I encourage you to join us. A lot of good stuff there. And maybe even something else. So we'll see. I'll do the best I can, Jah willing, to continue our fellowship. And I encourage you all to continue doing the same wherever you are. That's what I do. Pray every day, to give thanks to Jah, to ask him to help you grow and to be strong. Right? Remember, you have to have a realistic appraisal of yourself and who and where you are. Shouldn't try to think too big. Well, it's good to think big in some things, but when it comes to spiritual things, that's not necessary because the small things are big, right? And so the little things, if you look at the accounts involving Jesus, things he talked about, very clear the fundamental things we're supposed to be doing to be proving that we are following him. We can't do it perfectly, but we can be forgiven. And as long as we don't justify our mistakes and try to claim that, our sins are a good thing, then we're doing what we can do and should do. It's when we try to justify our wrongdoing at God's expense that there's a problem, or at someone else's expense, right? Matthew 18 stuff. Someone sins against you, causes a problem. You got to go to that person. We've talked about it. It's a big deal, especially with groups like Watchtower, right? Because they just don't follow that model. And neither do other groups either. Although maybe some of them do in some sense. It's just not well known, like Catholics. Either way, they have their own version of it, other traditions and things, ways of confessing or dealing with it. But Matthew 18 is very clear, is it not? So we don't need to go over that again. It's just what we follow. Watchtower does not. Okay. And, the problem is with a lot of people in Watchtower who are good-hearted in the sense that they love God in one way. None of us are good. Okay. This is the mistake a lot of Watchtower make as well. They see these people, they look good, they appear good, they're not good. And the more they try to make you think they're good, that's how much more they're not. Unless you think the Son of God lied when he said no one is good but one, right? Which makes no sense. If he in fact is good, as one commenter recently said to one of my videos, maybe on that subject, and Jesus could have just said, look, if you're going to call me good, then that's good because I am God, and so that's correct. I'll go, so good for you for addressing me that way. He wouldn't object to it. Trinitarians, they go crazy. And this is an essential attribute, right? Goodness. I talked about it in one of my Trinity videos, the one we talked about the attributes of God and Jesus and Trinity, right? So we get into some Trinity stuff here as well, and the whole angels of Jah in Genesis, like we did with angels of Jah in Zechariah. And it'll come up tonight, right? When, especially next time, part 40, where we get into chapter 19, which we discussed in part 33 outside of this series, just as, a point of discussion that often comes up. And I will either clip that discussion or the one coming up in part 44 to deal with this whole Jehovah raining fire down from Jehovah thing, which again, we've talked about. And we will again in part 40. So again, welcome to all of you who have joined us live or who will join us live. We'll give people a few more minutes and we'll get going. We spend about up to 2 hours, right? So we'll do this pre-show, a little just kind of discussion of whatever, give whoever's available time to join. I was off last week, so people are busy, so we do the best we can. So we'll finish up this pre-show, okay? And then we'll get into our reading. We're going to read the sections of chapters 14 through 18 that talk about angels, basically. And you're going to see a lot of very important things tonight, I think. You know how Trinitarians love to highlight the whole three men who appeared to Abraham, and he referred to them as Jehovah, they say, but it's not. You're going to see tonight that's not possible. Couldn't possibly be the case. I don't want to get into it more. I'll start talking about it. Either way, we're going to get into some stuff tonight. So good to see Betsy. Always a pleasure to have you, Betsy. Hope everything's going well for you and for every one of you out there. We all have to do what we have to do, right? And try the best we can. And even with Watchtower people, right? Because I deal with them a lot, so I brought them up a little bit. And of course, I come from that. So they're on my mind in terms of how I can help them without hurting. There's no easy way here because, well, those of you who are like me who've come to see the problems that can't be accepted, it's not that we disagree, obviously, with these other critically, and I would say even far more important stuff, Watchtower people, this whole equating of prophecy, chronology, and the governing body with God the Father, Jesus the Messiah, and the Golden Rule, that's insanity on its face, right? It just doesn't even look correct by comparison. So, nevertheless, that's what's taken place. And I know, as many of you do, how difficult it is, or will be, for people in the Watchtower who they do believe, but it's all tied to Watchtower, right? See, that's not what we do here. We do straight up Bible study, you and me. We obviously rely on God and the Holy Spirit and the Son who's here with us when there's two or more. But we read the text. We study it. Okay, we try to keep it on a level where everyone can be in the same understanding. Even if you don't know the original languages or technical stuff, we break it down, right? That's not going to do any, I think it doesn't do any good if we can't explain it. So usually we are able to break down the most difficult or technical things so that you can increase your knowledge exponentially. If you're a part of our discussion, our Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion, or really any live discussion we have, I think, but these, right, these are where we focus on things and we study them. Our text readings too, right? That's probably like the most hardcore because it's just straight reading, analysis, and discussion. This is that too, but that's more of a linear sequential approach. And while this is that in the series sense, that's it in a text sense. So, whereas this, we're going to jump around a little bit. In that we do everything I've translated. So there's differences. We really try to just get into the Bible. Right. I believe, as many of you do, the Bible speaks for itself. It doesn't really need a whole lot of interpreters. It is, it's so funny because it does today, right? It's like, can't figure out anything without just getting all these sophisticated tools or texts, Excuse me. Well, I don't really mean that. It just seems like that. Because I think, well, what happens is the controversial stuff is what just gets the lion's share. It stands out, right? All the other stuff is in agreement. So if someone comes along with the King James and New World Translation and reads John 1:1, you can't even get past that verse, right? Let's say you were going to come together for a study group, you and someone with the King James, and you've got NWT. Well, and you're going to start with John. And good luck getting past verse 1, right? So is that really how you think John wanted it? Do you think John wanted his the opening verse of his account to be that difficult to understand? I don't. I think it's like just obvious. It's become not obvious because of the tainting that the Trinity has done to it, right? That these word was God, capital G-O-D, has done to it. And then the demonization of NWT and in God. Oh my goodness. So, that's really created this rift where no matter how much grammatical or historical or contextual information you bring to Trinitarians and you understand John 1:1, nope, right? Even if they would, set aside Trinity and not interpret it according to Trinity, which they probably couldn't do, but if they said they would, it's just going to be so hard to accept a God, right? It's kind of like how hard it would be for Watchtower to start partaking, like we'll do later on. If you stick with us to the end, we'll do it. Don't worry. 2 hours or less. Right? Everyone gets this prejudiced view of something in a way that it's almost impossible for them to change to what is actually the right way. Trying to get a Trinitarian to accept Jesus as God's first creation. I don't care what you say, creation, be glory. I just mean like temporally distinct from the Father, okay? They're what? He's a creature? Is that what you just said? They're going to go crazy. How could he be a creature? What? A creature? Yeah, in Revelation 5, the text you guys always misunderstand and misrepresent, and so we've done videos about it. It talks about a creature right there, the Lamb. And you know what it says? It says he's worthy. Yeah, to receive what you guys misinterpret as worship equal to God, which isn't that. Because the very reason God is worshipped as being worthy is in the verses right before chapter 5, verse 11, chapter 4. He created all things, Katizo. Trinitarians, not use the Jesus. So then you get into Revelation 5 and what? It's the Lamb who was what? Trinitarians slaughtered. That's a creature. What are you talking about? Why do you guys keep saying he's God there? It's talking about him as a lamb dying. So no matter what he is there, that's his man part to you, right? Because you guys create two when he's really just one, right? He's either one or the other, and he's one each time. That's how the Bible actually describes the existences of the Son of God. But we understand you have Trinity, right? You got the dual nature thing. Once again, that's what we're talking about before we get started with the show. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Everett is on fire. He showed up. Betsy and Everett, good to see you both. Betsy says her husband underwent cataract surgery on 8th because of diabetic. Under medicine now. 8 weeks under medication. Take care, Betsy. You're a wonderful, loving sister and a wife. Jaw's very, very happy. I know this because I read the text and I see how he responds and deals with women and how they love their husbands. I was reading Abraham and Sarah. We'll see a little tonight. So you're doing wonderful. I'm very proud of you, and I'm thankful you're a part of our group because I believe Jah is blessing you and blessing us by having you demonstrate in ways that are Christian how to live as a woman. Very nice. Everett does the same thing, right? Speed, George Lopez. George Lopez is like, perfect timing. Boom. Good to see you guys. So we're going to get started here. I was just wrapping it up. My little kind of preamble thinking, all this stuff. We're talking about Trinity a minute ago, right? Back to the dual nature, right? They love that dual nature. But what does it say in Revelation 5? See, I picked it back up, Trinitarians. Sorry. I know Everett's pumped up. Right? It says the Lamb was slaughtered. Why? He's worthy. Why, Trinitarians? To receive the what? The same thing that the Father's receiving for a different reason? Because the Lamb, it's the Lamb, Trinitarians. What are you talking about? He's a creature right there. Even if he's being worshipped in the sense that he couldn't possibly be worshipped because he's a creature right there, he's a creature right there. The Lamb, who was slaughtered. You understand? He was killed. You know what slaughtered means, Trinitarians? Means he died. Yeah. Just the same thing that Philippians 2 says. You know, is why he's worthy to be exalted. Not exalted in praise, but exalted positionally. Trinitarians freak on that too. They misunderstand the nuance, the different senses of exalted. They conflate them and misapply them. Either way, it says he's given the name above every name. And Hebrews 1, same thing. Made purification, sat down at the right hand, became better than the angels. Mutability, Trinitarians. Will you knock it off with the same today, yesterday, and forever? That's not everything. Yeah, that's talking about very specific contextual things that earlier in Hebrews, as I just quoted, chapter 1, are clearly mutable, right? He becomes better than the angels. What are you talking about? No Trinity, right? So he becomes better because he was a man. He was made lower than the angels, God, sons of God. Speaking of whom, leading right into our part 3. In part 1, we talked about let us make, right? Someone's with God there. Trinitarians say Trinity, right? They read in light of Trinity. We don't assume Trinity. We look at the Bible. We look at historical sources like we did. We try to understand it from within the Bible and its context. And we were able to do so very clearly, right? By going to Job 38, Psalm 8, 2 other accounts in the Bible, the Old Testament, that talk about the exact same time and events of Genesis 1 and the exact same beings that were there, right? Nobody argues that the sun wasn't there except, the ridiculous Socinians, right? We don't even have to deal with them. Just out of here, right? You guys are gone. I see nothing of any need to address where they're concerned, right? It's just like, okay, whatever. But Trinitarians, a little more history, a little more substance, right? We try to deal with them. We try to help them. They've been abused, right? Like Watchtower, threat of heresy. All this abuse, right? All this spiritual abuse. We try to avoid that. We try not to give you that here. Now, I hold people accountable occasionally. Right? I'm a person. And we just, we're doing public things here that are typically, not, we deal with a lot of people, more so the people we don't know, right? We're not like in a controlled setting or in a home or we have a house congregation. We know everyone. So we deal with different things at times that don't always go as planned. But we do our best. We have a good group on more often than not. Speaking of whom, right, we got Barnabas and Bankhead. Now it's a spiritual party, right, or a congregation. Right? We try to look at it in a spiritual way, but we can use party in figurative sense. So we have all these things, right? All these Trinitarian things we talk about. And in part 1, we talked about that whole let us make. And it was very clear when we looked at Psalm 8 and Genesis 38 and light of Genesis 1, sons of God are there, right? No question about it. They were there to have man made lower than them, right? The animals were made, but mankind didn't exist yet. So they weren't made lower than man. They were just made. And man was made superior. A Trinitarian didn't bring this up. I just started thinking about it. I want to insulate you guys against potential Trinity attack, right? They say, well, yeah, but so the animals were made lower than Adam, but they were made first, so that doesn't mean that Adam or that the angels were there when man was made. Well, that's not the same case, right? The animals were made. It doesn't say they were made lower than man, which would require that man is already in existence in order for there to be a point of comparison, like we have in Psalm 8 with the gods, sons of God, angels, and man. So we know for a fact the sons of God, the angels, gods, all three of them were used, Psalm 8, Job 38, or they mean that, right? Sons of God, also a Hebrew idiom, Benai Elohim, but they're also called Elohim in Psalm 8. Then we have, of course, the translation, the Septuagint, of angels, which is also in the case of Psalm 8, except in the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 2. So, very clear, we know Jesus is there, except for, the Socinian whack jobs and some others, right? We understand Muslims and others. Not everyone's a whack job if you don't believe in the preexistence of Jesus. The Socinians are nuts, though, okay? Most of them. The ones I've encountered, gone, right? Probably some honest-hearted people, just misled, right? They got Carlos and Anthony, but they're gone, right? So they're skinned and thrown about like sheep without a shepherd. We'll try to help them. But, if you fall for that, I think you might as well become a Muslim, right? They have a much better construct that makes more sense with no preexistence than you Socinians do. Okay, I'll say that. Socinians are pretty much gone, right? If you claim to be a Christian, not a Muslim who also claims to be a Christian, I mean just straight up Christian, and you can't see the preexistence of Jesus in the Bible, don't even, just stop it, okay? I don't want to hear it. Go talk to other people, plenty of other people. I've already done a few things. I'll probably do more, but it's no. I haven't heard any responses to anything I've done. They're all ridiculous. No. So, and I think most people can see it. So it doesn't even register to me most of the time. But there are some nice Socinians I've met. So I don't want to make it like they're all gone. They just, because of the people that take the lead, they seem gone. Some Trinitarians make it seem like that too, but there's more Trinitarians. So we know how to differentiate better between the Trinitarian apologetic nuts, and your basic average Trinitarian that doesn't care about arguing and all this stuff. They just want to believe in the Bible and believe in the Lord and try to be good people. Same with Watchtower people. There are a lot in all these religions, right? You get the people who are just trying to get through life. But then you have the ones that really understand what's happening, right? Just like Jesus. Who did he hold more accountable? The ones who understood what they were doing, right? The leaders, the ones who should have known better. Okay, so we try not to practice that here. We try to talk about things. We enforce three things, and we leave everything else to interpretation. Now, we'll argue a little at times, not in a vehement way, very rare, but more in just, we have different views, and that's okay. But we are not going to divert off onto our differences for the sake of our agreements. Not unless, we have to, or it's like the subject. So otherwise, we try to just focus on the big three: Jah, Jesus, you, and me. Right? If we can get all those three mastered, fine. We'll go spend time doing all the other arguing of minor things. Or again, if they come up, right? We talk about other stuff. We have to. Because Jah, Jesus, you, and me, that can be broadened out. But it has to be explicit, right? We don't enforce things that aren't explicit. We don't enforce our opinions as if they're facts. We can have an opinion. We can believe strongly in our opinion. But if we start to mistake our opinion as a fact, that's where we get into trouble, right? We start believing more in ourselves than in the actual objective evidence we have access to. So with that in mind, let me just move to part 2. We talked about Genesis 1. We talked about Genesis 2, 3, 4, and 5. We talked about the account in the Garden of Eden involving Satan and what kind of being he is, according to the accounts. He's obviously like Eve, right? Only other beings described as being on the level of humans, being made in our image, that has become like one of us, are the sons of God and God. And no one else is described on that level in Job 38 or Psalm 8. So we believe Satan is one of these sons of God. And there are other sons of God described in the accounts of Genesis 1 through 5, like the cherubim, who have the flaming sword to protect the entrance to the garden. So we have a lot of early references to these beings. And with the help of other books like Psalms and Job, we can identify in Genesis 1 and following who these are. And then again, you get the specific reference to the cherubim. So Then we moved into part 2, chapter 6 through 13. And we talked about how the sons of God in chapter 6 appear almost 100% to be the same sons of God who are identified in Genesis 1 as being with God in the beginning, according to Psalm 8 and Job 38. And John 1, right? Because Jesus is the Son of God. The sons of God are there. He's there. He's the Son of God. He's firstborn. He's still Son of God. That's why he puts himself in that same category as one of the sons of God in John 10 and elsewhere. But we saw in Genesis 6 how these sons of God who noticed the daughters of men, it doesn't appear to be possible that they could be men, sons of men. Because, as we discussed, in order for there to be daughters who were being born to the men who were alive, as the account said, in order for there to be these daughters born to men, says the number of men began increasing and daughters began being born to them, and the sons of God noticed them. And then it talks about how they began taking all they chose, and then it immediately connects that with the Nephilim, who were there and there then and later. So, but in order for daughters to be born at that rate, right, because it said they began increasing in number across the earth, and daughters were being born to them. The only way that could happen is if sons of men were already noticing and having relations with daughters of men and increasing the number of men, as Genesis 6 says. After which, the sons of God, not the sons of men, began noticing the daughters. And then we read other sources, non-biblical, but related to the Bible, with textual support in the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? So these are not texts that you can just set aside as of no importance, right? So we have first Enoch and Tobit. We have texts that describe the sons of God in Genesis 6 as angels. And then again, we have the sons of God described in Genesis 1. And then again here in Genesis 6. And then we have in Jude reference to the angels who didn't keep their place, and how the sons of God in Genesis 6, if the only way angels could take daughters would be, the daughters can't go to heaven. They can't live in the heavens. Nothing indicates they could do that. So they would have to come down. They would have to leave their place, right? Fits exactly with what Jude says. So we identified these and other accounts in Genesis chapters 1 through 13, right before tonight's reading, Genesis 14 through 18, and other appearances, right? We started to get into accounts where you can watch the prior parts for the text, where God began appearing and talking. And this is very important, especially for tonight, because I talked about it in part 2 to some degree. I encourage you to watch that, because I get into the whole, how could this really be God if it's the Father, right? Because in the New Testament, in John chapters 1 and 5, it says, no one has seen God, no one has heard his voice or seen his shape. Okay, so no one has seen the Trinitarians except that's the Father. We believe that that's the Father too, because the Father is God, the one God, right? Jesus God and our God, right? That's the one God. And the sons of God represent that God to us, so we can call them God, like everyone in the Bible does. Just read Acts 7, look at the original accounts that Acts 7 is referring to. Every single one of those Old Testament accounts has God talking as God. And in Acts 7, under inspiration, that is interpreted as angels speaking for God. Not an angel, angels in each account. And then it goes on to quote one of the accounts as one of the angels speaking as the Lord, similar to what we saw in Zechariah. All of this is available to us to use to interpret these texts, and Trinitarians and others completely ignore them or misinterpret them in ways that don't fit the context or the history of the text, in terms of how the terms and these beings were viewed and used. So we're going to get into that more tonight, where God starts appearing and speaking, right? Now, we talked about how Trinitarians could say, well, yeah, but it's not the Father, it's the Son or the Holy Spirit who's talking as a person of the Trinity, right? Because they're assuming Trinity. We don't do that, but we're going to entertain the argument because, that's what they do. So they see this as real, right? They see these accounts where God is like talking from the first person, and where the text says God said or God appeared to Abraham. They believe that was really God. That even if it was an angel, it's a Jehovah angel. It's a special angel, uncreated, right? They'll argue with you to the death, based practically, that Jesus isn't an angel, only to turn around and insist that he's this angel. But they, again, are assuming the Trinity and not interpreting the accounts according to the accounts, the stuff I just mentioned, and that we'll read tonight, right? So they see it as another person of the Trinity. We don't. We see it as an angel. And we see the God that no one has heard or seen as the Father, not a person of God, but God, right? See, they totally changed the construct of the terms, the relationship of the terms. Instead of God, it's a person of God. That's not what it says. And that's not whom God is identified as the Bible, as a Trinity. No, he's identified as the Father, okay? And the sons of God are identified as being able to speak to him and therefore be addressed as God. Real simple stuff when you really break it down, but it's become complicated. It's become Trinity. So this is why we do it. I'll try to stay focused on just the non-Trinity stuff, but it's going to come up here tonight, especially. The three men, they love three. But I'm going to show there's no way that could be Trinity, or that the Father could be any of those three. Therefore, no Trinity. Okay, but they love that. They love it when Abraham sees three men, and he says, then he said to Jehovah, "I'm going to prove none of those three are the Father. Impossible." Okay, so whereas in part 2 in the accounts we read, it's clearly not the Father, because that one who's it calls God or Jehovah is talking. So like with the accounts related to Acts 7, it doesn't matter if it says it's God talking. If you don't understand, no one has seen God and no one has heard his voice, and you don't understand these other accounts that Acts 7 and other texts refer to, why don't you understand? Are you not accepting these accounts? Have you not read them? Is it Trinity? Okay. So you need to have a conversation with yourself and just try to explain to us why you aren't seeing these things we're showing you. Why are you insisting it has to be a person of the Trinity when it doesn't say that? And in tonight's reading, you're going to see it can't possibly be the Father as any of those three men. So let's get into it. Let's go ahead and pull up the Bible Hub, because we're not reading every text, okay? So we've been going for about 40 minutes. We're going to read 4 sections from Genesis 14 through 18. So we should be going for about another hour or so. Then we'll partake, okay? And if we have time, we'll read a brief text from the New Testament, a little encouraging thought right there as we partake. Little thought to share. But if we get into the whole reading and the account and the Genesis stuff, we'll just go straight to partaking, okay? So thank you all again for joining me. Good to see TKS as well. Let's bring up the text stuff, Bible Hub. Bring you guys up here. Genesis, all right, let's go to Genesis 15. First chapter in the section that we're reviewing, where we have accounts that explicitly or potentially involve angels, right? So again, we've reviewed accounts to this point, for example, with Satan in the Garden of Eden. Well, it doesn't explicitly say he's an angel or a son of God, but he's presented in discussion and able to deceive humans, and no other beings are presented to us as being able to do so but the sons of God or God. So sometimes we don't have explicit connections, but we do have at least the information that those accounts give, and then whatever other accounts may tell us. So to the extent we can show that, we will. But I will also note things that just may be important, where we want every detail we can find that credibly relates to the identity of these angels, the angels of Jah. Who are these beings? How do they relate to God? And where's Jesus in relation to these sons of God, these angels, or Jah, right? So Genesis 15. Okay, so we've been using, for the most part, the NIV, a morally bankrupt translation that has some value, but quite honestly, in addition to having the morally bankrupt representation of the divine name right there, promotes Trinity, and has some very unusual renderings of texts. I'll just leave it at that. We've talked about many before. We'll discuss them as they come up if necessary. Verse 1. Okay, we'll also go to the comparison. Can I bring that over? Let me do that now. Where's the multi here? Sometimes my Bible Hub setting gets adjusted there. I think this is better. Let's make it big or still visible. That's too big. We'll make it like that. Okay, and while the NIV is a translation of the Hebrew, right across from it you have the Greek Septuagint translation. We'll refer to it as we need to, but it's actually a translation of the Hebrew text that's in this column below the Greek, okay? Although sometimes the NIV, like with Psalm 8, right, we saw, it's almost like it translates the Septuagint versus the Hebrew. That having been said, verse 1, Genesis 15, angels of Jah, where are they and what are they doing? Who are they? After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Now let me stop there, right? So when you see the word, right, you may think, no, it's not capitalized, but some people, some Trinitarians and others, they still see this as like Jesus as the word, like the John 1:1 word. And while that's possible, right, even though the Greek, as you see here, at least in Sweets, it says, but after the words, right, came to be, ta hremata tauta. These words, it does not use the word logos or logoi, or any form of the word for word, logos. But, you could always argue maybe the Septuagint didn't understand that relationship here, and so the Hebrew term actually does relate to Jesus in the New Testament as the word. I don't believe so. Okay, as we saw in our readings in the book of Zechariah, in the Angels of Jah and Zechariah series, the angels there are more than one, receive words from Jah. It's showing they're not Jah, by the way. But that aside, I believe that's what we're talking about here, okay? The same thing we saw in Zechariah where the words come from Jah to the angels, or the word of Jah comes to Zechariah. It's the actual, things that Jah wants you to know, like actual words. Whether or not the word, Jesus in his pre-human state, is involved, well, we don't know that, right? If it's not explicit, we don't know that. But we know words are coming, okay? So I wanted to say that so, again, you understand when people say, well, that word, the word of the Lord, that's Jesus. Well, not likely, okay? And it doesn't say that. There's no explicit connection. Even the Greek words are different. But either way, it's clearly referring to words that are being presented. That's explicit. Because it says, after this, the word of the Lord, morally bankrupt, Jah, came to Abram in a vision. And so here are the words. Right? It's not like a being who appeared here. The word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision, and light was radiating from his face, type thing, where it's now the being is the thing that came. No, it's the words. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. Verse 2. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? Verse 3, and Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Verse 4, then the word of the Lord came to him. So same thing as we discussed in verse 1. And the words are presented immediately. This man will not be your heir, Eliezer of Damascus, but a son who is in your own flesh and blood will be your heir. Verse 5. We're going to read to verse 7. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Verse 6. Abram believed Jah, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Okay, so we can see here, it says he took him outside, right? It says the word of the Lord, then it doesn't say like who's talking here. We just know these are the words from Jah. Someone is telling them to Abraham. And it says he, Alton in the Greek, took him, Abraham, outside. Or the he who took him would be part of the verb exegagen, with Alton as the object of being taken outside. So exegagen, but he took him, Abraham, Alton, outside, exo. And he said, Look up at the stars and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, right, this is that being, whoever's talking here, bringing the words of Jah to Abraham, says to him, So shall your offspring be. And Abraham believed Jah. And verse 7, he also said to him, okay, this is the key part, I am Jah, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. Now, what have we been reading here? The word of who? Of whom? Whose words? Jah's words, right? So regardless of who is speaking them, whose words are they? It said it twice. The word of Jah, the words, according to the Greek, of Jah. So someone is here, not yet identified, talking to Abram and bringing to Abram the word or words, the actual literal words of Jah. Even speaking in the first person. But we know it said it twice. These are the words of Jah. So if these are the words of Jah, wouldn't he be speaking in the first person? Yes. which is exactly why in the accounts referenced in Acts chapter 7, with Moses at the burning bush and on Mount Sinai, where God is directly talking to him just like this. In Acts, it says those were angels. Here we don't know, right? I mean, according to the first person, we could say it's Ja'ol speaking, but these are the words of Ja'ol. So that's not a necessary conclusion. If it just said, he said to him, I am the Lord, without saying these are the words of Ja'ol, we would still have to deal with, as we are going to, this whole who's actually there, right? Because on the one hand, we have accounts where it says it's God. On the other hand, we have inspired interpretations of those accounts in Acts 7 saying it was angels. We have other accounts that says that it was angels speaking for God explicitly. Okay, so in the Acts 7 accounts, it's not explicitly angels at all. It's just God, Jehovah, Ja'ol. But even those accounts were interpreted as angels talking. So there is nothing out of place historically or textually with understanding angels as speaking for Ja'ol here. Now, it's not explicit yet. It's not explicit in the accounts involving Moses and the burning bush and Mount Sinai either, and yet it's interpreted that way. But still, we have this word of Ja'ol, the words of Ja'ol coming and being presented to Abram, either directly by Ja'ol, like he's right there. Trinitarians would usually say he is a person of the Trinity or the Trinity, whatever, right? They would say it's God. Whoever it is, it has to be God. Can't be an angel talking like that. No, it can't possibly be an angel saying that they're God or they're Ja'ol. Even though in the New Testament, book of Acts chapter 7, the inspired account says that angels do exactly those things, can't possibly be them. No way. No, because Trinity, right? All right, so this is very important that we have at this point these words of Ja'ol being conveyed to people like Abraham. And we need to know, is it actually Ja'ol, or is there someone else who's bringing these words, right? We saw in Zechariah, there's definitely more than one angel bringing Ja'ol's words to Zechariah. Let's take a look now at Genesis 16, our second account in part 3's reading. Genesis 16, let's go to verse 7. And we're going to read verses 7 through 16, excuse me. All right, now here we get explicit identification of who's talking or who's doing what. In verse 7, it says, the angel of Ja'ol found Hagar near a spring in the desert, right? This is right after, remember Sarah gave her to Abraham? She gave Hagar to Abram as his wife, as his woman. And it uses the singular, by the way, you anti-polygamists or whatever. There's a lot of very strange people out there who think that the Old Testament somehow was just not at all adhered to in the New in terms of like things that aren't explicitly prohibited for non-overseers. But either way, I've done videos about it. And you can do what you want because we follow the law of the land. But this was right after Sarah gave Hagar to Abram, because women back then were like, different than they are today. So were the men. So don't worry, women. Either way, that's what she did. But when she got pregnant, because it is, as much as they may have been more used to having more women with one man in the biblical times, the intrusion of sin and just, the difficulties of life, when Hagar became pregnant, right, she began to look at Sarah with disdain because she started to elevate her self-worth, even though she was still Sarah's mistress, Sarah's servant. And Sarah was allowing her to be with her husband. So for Hagar to look upon her mistress with disdain after all that, it's kind of understandable why she wouldn't want her there anymore, right? She's the one who allowed her to sleep with her husband to get pregnant so they'd have more children as part of the family. And here Hagar is getting upset with Sarah once she gets pregnant. So that makes a little more sense of Sarah's response to get her out of there, right? So this is right after that. Hagar takes off, and the angel of Jah found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. Verse 8, and he said, right, this is the angel of Jah. So according to Trinitarians, this is the Son of God, right, basically. They usually identify the angel of Jah as the second person of the Trinity. And we would also, as Christian Witnesses of Jah, and probably many Jehovah's Witnesses, we would also see this as the pre-human Son of God, the preeminent figure that we can connect through accounts like we read in Jude where Michael the archangel is disputing with Satan over Moses' body. And the only angels that's said to be there during that time leading the Israelites is the angel of Jah with Jah's name within him, with authority to pardon and not pardon. Who else would be arguing with Satan if it wasn't him? And we have other accounts that we've done videos that show the relationship between the prince of the army of Jah in Joshua 5, the angel of Jah throughout the Old Testament, and Michael the archangel, according to Jude and the book of Daniel. So we believe this angel here is Jesus before he became a man, the archangel, Michael, in my view. As Christian Witness of Jah, it's not required to identify Michael as the angel of Jah or Jesus, but I do, and I believe the evidence is compelling, but we try to be reasonable. We try to make it without going against anything explicit, since it doesn't explicitly say, like it does, one God the Father. It doesn't say Jesus is Michael. He's definitely an archangel. We know that 1 Thessalonians 4, and the way he's described in Revelation 1, right? Being given a revelation by God to give to others, which is what an angel does, but then passing that on to other angels, which is what an archangel does. So will you knock it off, Trinitarians? Either way, the angel of Jah says to Hagar, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? Hagar says, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. This is before she was named Sarah. She answered, verse 9, then the angel of the Lord, angel of Jah, another explicit reference here, told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her, right? Because of what I just said. Does it make more sense now based on the way I framed it and how much Sarah had actually done for Hagar? And then the way she turned around, right? And just, so, women, it's not easy to begin with, but, if things go south in an already precarious situation, yeah, it's game over. Angel of the Lord said, go back, submit to her, right? She was good to you. She let you have Abraham and children. Should have been more appreciative. Abram. Verse 10, the angel added, I will increase your descendants. In the Septuagint, just looking over in Sweets, it does say the angel of the Lord. Now, in the New International, and it actually does say in the Hebrew, I'm looking over here, right? Malach Yehwah, right? That's how it's pointed, at least in the Westminster. Yahweh is a common vowel point of the divine name. So it actually, NIV once again, let me just say this. The NIV is, well, I want to say terrible, But I'll just say not my favorite by far. And it's because of stuff like this, right? I mean, we can see right here, right? The Aleppo Codex, Malach, yeah, Ya'ol. I wanted to say Yahuwah because I'm so used to reading it. It's clearly saying angel of Ja'ol. New American Standard gets it right. King James gets it right. What does Net say? Net Bible? The Lord's angel? Why couldn't NIV, right? So this is literally a text in the NIV where it didn't even use the divine name, right? It's not, it's closer to the Septuagint, but it's not even that, at least according to Sweets, which isn't the newest, but it's still pretty good. It's the only one on here. Either way, can you guys believe that? On the Berean Study Bible too. They don't even follow their morally bankrupt practice of using Lord. They literally not only mistranslate the text and just use angel, they don't even use the divine name here. You guys should point that out to people who are using the NIV. Or if they criticize NWT, Watchtower people, and you see they have the NIV, show them Genesis 16:10. Ask them, why does it say angel there? Especially since you believe the angel of the Lord is a person of the Trinity. I don't know. It just gets so weird. I'm going to read it according to the actual trend, the Greek and Hebrew. The angel of Ja'ol added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. Okay. Now, this is really important, right? This is really important, right? And New Living Translation is even worse. Doesn't even use angel. Okay, but let's focus on this. Look at how the angel is speaking. Speaking from the first person, right? The Hebrew and the Greek explicitly state the angel of the Lord or angel of Ya'ol. So we have a clear example here in Genesis 16 of an angel speaking as Ja'ol. Is that not clear here? Right? Because who is the one who is said to be increasing, right? It's Ja'ol that does this ultimately, right? We know he can empower angels or even the Son of God, like he empowered the angel in Exodus 23, right? To pardon and not pardon and to do all these things. His name was within him. So he can do whatever he wants in that regard, but he's still speaking as himself. But the angel is speaking for him. Can you imagine an angel, let alone the angel of Ja'ol, doing anything but speaking the actual words of Ja'ol? Like breaking off and talking on its own? No. And we read in Genesis 15 already, twice, in verses 1 through 7, that these are the words of Ja'ol. They're not the speaker's words unless the speaker is Ja'ol, right? That's the only exception. We're going to deal with it. Trinitarians say, yeah, right. A second person of the Trinity right there. Angel of the Lord. It's an angel. Yeah, this is a fact. We'll get into the whole angel of the Lord Trinity thing in a minute. First thing is first. We clearly have the angel of Ja'ol mistranslated in the NIV terribly, but we have an explicit identification of an angel, specifically the angel of Ja'ol, talking in the first person the words of Ja'ol. Just like we saw in Genesis 15, 1 through 7, we just didn't know who was talking, right? Now we know it can't be the Father because the person is talking to Abraham. And Jesus said, no one has heard the Father's voice, right? Even Trinitarians would say, right, that's the Son, second person, right, Trinity. Okay, we'll get to that. Let's just establish a few critical facts. Number one, there's an angel here. Even the NIV got that part right. It just blew everything else. I don't know how, but it did. Literally taking the divine name out of the Bible, right? Not even substituting with a morally bankrupt Lord or something. Really bad. Either way, we know this is an angel. That's a fact. Trinitarians, you can say all you want, it's a special angel. Fine. We'll get to that. Okay, this is not my point right now. It's an angel. Angel, Lord, we get it, but it doesn't matter. I'm trying to establish fundamentals, okay? We all agree this is an angel. And we all agree that the angel is speaking in the first person, either as God or because of it being the actual words of Jah that come in the first person. We're going to leave that open for now. We know for a fact there is an angel here speaking either as Jah or the words of Jah. We know, we've already seen in the prior chapter, the words of Jah coming to Abram and being spoken to him. So the question is this that same continuation of an angel, the angel of Jah, speaking the words of Jah to Abram? Or is it another person of the Trinity besides the Father? Because everybody basically agrees it can't be the Father. Because Abraham is actually hearing, in Trinitarian's view, God here. But it can't be the Father's voice. That's a fact. That's like unavoidable. And the person is being, this angel, Abraham is seeing this angel too. We saw appearances in part 2. You're going to see appearances again here, same thing. So they're being seen. Even all three, well, I'll get to it. And so John 1:18, John chapter 5, both clearly show this can't be the Father. Other than the words of the Father, right? Well, that's what we all believe it is. Well, except maybe Trinitarian, they don't even, the Son hears everything from the Father, though. So again, moving beyond that, though, we've got an angel here speaking first person as God. It's an angel, though. Okay, so all the way back in Genesis, we have an explicit identification of an angel speaking as God, or delivering the words of God in the first person of God, which is exactly what Acts 7 says happened in multiple accounts. Okay, so this is a very important text, and additionally, the way NIV and other translations remove the divine name and de-specify the specific angel being described. Angel of Jah. Verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord Jah also said to her, "You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for Jah has heard your misery." We have both, again, in the Hebrew and in the Greek, angel of the Lord. NIV gets it right here. Totally blew it in verse 10. Verse 12. Speaking of Ishmael, he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Verse 13. We're going to go to 16. She gave this name to Jah, who spoke to her. "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." Okay. Now think about that right there. Now we can see very clearly, right? It's like explicit beyond just text that we've read and we'll read again this evening, where God appears I mean, Sarah says, if we look at a couple other translations, look at New American Standard, then she called the name of Ja'ol who spoke to her. You are a God who sees me. For she said, I have even remained alive here after seeing him. Okay, so to me, this proves this angel cannot be the Father and cannot be God. Because no one has seen God at any time. It doesn't limit it to the Father in John 1:18. There's only one God anyway, and that is the Father, Trinitarians. But we can grant you that in John 5, he specifies the Father, which again is God, but still, for you, it's Trinity. So we know this isn't the Father, right? Because they're hearing the voice of this being directly. And now we're seeing that Sarai explicitly reflects outwardly and audibly on seeing this one and remain alive, right? She's like, how am I still alive? I'm looking right at you. So there's no way. There's no way this could be God. John 1:18 is one of the most explicit texts, period. No one has seen God at any time. I mean, these accounts are like, oh, everyone knew these accounts. And they all knew, just like Acts 7 shows they knew, that these were angels. And that's why John could say no one has seen God at any time. Even though this account here says Sarah explicitly referred to Ja'ol as God, whom she has seen and remained alive. What other interpretation could you have than Acts 7? These are angels. It even said that explicitly, right? This is the angel of the Lord. We know this. This is what we have established. So she's referring to the angel of the Lord in this way, but we know that's not what she means. She understands this angel as absolutely 100% representing Ja'ol to her. He's talking like Ja'ol, bringing the words of Ja'ol, but yet they know it's the angel of Ja'ol. This is why Thomas in John 20:28 did the exact same thing. Right after Jesus said who their God is and who his God is, the Father, Thomas understood, just like Sarai understood, that the angel of the Father, the angel of Ja'ol, absolutely 100%, just like Jesus told all of them multiple times, represent him. They are essentially him when they do this. You wouldn't be able to even tell the difference if you read the account of the burning bush in Exodus. The only being you would think is talking to Moses is God. He literally gives his name, everything, right? And he gives the whole famous Exodus 3:14 thing. And yet Acts says that was angels, plural. Okay, so we interpret the Bible within itself. We don't create this doctrine hundreds of years later and then look at the Bible in light of that. No, we just look at it and say, okay, we know for a fact we've got the angel of the Lord here, angel of Ja'ol, speaking in the first person the words of Ja'ol. And Sarai and Avram accept this angel as absolutely representative of Ja'ol. So much so, she can say, I saw him and lived. That's exactly, basically, what Manoah and his wife said. Well, they thought they would die, right? They saw the angel of Ja'ol ascend in a flame off the altar. I don't think it even said angel of Ja'ol explicitly in those texts in Judges 12. said the angel they were speaking to, who was speaking as Ja'ol, but it then says it's an angel that they saw enter the flame on the altar and ascend. And they said, we shall positively die, because most translations say, as we've talked about, it is God we have seen. But that could only be in the sense in which we have right here, right? Where the angel is speaking as God and being addressed as God, which is what happens all over the place. And in Judges 12, it creates a contradiction, right? Again, with John 1:18. If Manoah and his wife saw God in the spirit, right? Because the angel ascends in a flame with the flames. So that's like his glorified state. There's not a human cloak there when it's in the flame ascending. They would have seen God, if that's how you want to accept the translations of most texts. But that directly contradicts John 1:18. It says no one has seen God. So you have Judges 12 saying, Manoah and his wife saying, we have seen God. You have John 1:18 saying, no one has seen God. Well, who's right? I'm going to go with John 1:18, and I'm going to translate Judges 12 right. It's a God we have seen, or God in the sense that Sarai and others see this angel as God. In the same way in the New Testament, they saw Jesus as God, the Father, his Father and our Father, his God and our God. Could he make it any clearer? So if he just told you who his and our God is, where's the confusion? Anytime you're referring to Jesus or any of these sons of God as God, you're speaking through them to the Father. They're speaking to you from the Father every time, unless they're doing their own will. And this is what Trinitarians have failed to teach their members. So these accounts seem just odd, right? They don't seem to make sense. Like, how could angels be talking and acting like this? They'd have to be in Trinity, right? No, this is how angels are. It's how they're presented and described all throughout the Bible, and how the New Testament interprets accounts that are just said to be God. Yeah, you've just been learning all this Trinitarian stuff that comes about later that doesn't include all this as the backdrop to understand what's happening in the New Testament. All right, so we clearly have an angel talking as Ja'ol, and Sarai referring to the angel as God, as Ja'ol, and even being blown away that she's seeing him and living. It's like Manoah and his wife. Neither one of them actually saw God. John 1:18. All right, Trinitarians might want to say, though, it's just the Father. Well, again, John 1:18 doesn't say Father. It says God. Okay? And we're not assuming Trinity. So can you knock it off? Well, we're going to make it even more clear. First, verse 14. That is why the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Verse 16. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Verse 17. Last text. When Abram was 99 years old, Ja'ol appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. Okay. So we very clearly have here Ja'ol right here in the Hebrew text. My name right there. It has Kyrios in the Septuagint of Swedes, but we have, doesn't say angel, right? We have Ja'ol appearing to Avram, and explicitly, again, using the first person, I am God Almighty. Now, based on what we've read so far, it seems to me fairly clear that we have the same angel here, or an angel, speaking the word of God, of Ja'ol. Now, there's still some question as to whether or not, at least in this account that we're reading, and in the book of Genesis as a whole to this point, whether God could appear in this way, right? It's only later we find out no one has seen God at any time. No one has heard the Father's voice or seen his shape. No one can see my glory and live, right? This is in later, at least the Exodus account involving Moses, and no one can see my glory. And then John on seeing God or hearing the Father's voice. So we're trying to just progressively look at this, and we've seen the words of the Lord coming to Abram. We've seen the angel of the Lord be explicitly identified as speaking the word of the Lord to Abram. Trinitarians will say, no, it's the person of the Trinity speaking the word to Abram. Well, we'll get into that. We know it's an angel, though. That's a fact. It is explicitly identified in Genesis 16 as an angel of the Lord, unless you're reading NIV, right? So we know that's happening. Is that happening here? Okay, well, if this is really Jah-ol, since we can't tell, and that is what it says, but we know we have this angel, and we have the way this all boils down to no one seeing or hearing the Father's voice or seeing God. This can't be the Father, right? That's a fact. We're not sure if it's an angel. Trinitarians want to say Trinity. We'll leave that open. But even they would say this can't be the Father, right? Because it's appearing and talking. And no one has heard the Father's voice or seen him. So it would have to be, if we accept Trinity, right, we assume it, it'd have to be a member of the Trinity, or it would have to be an angel. Verse 2. Then I will make my covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers. Remember, this was the exact same things the angel of Jah-ol said to him, right? It says, this is in this account in Genesis 17, it says, Jah-ol appeared and said, I'm God Almighty. I will greatly increase your numbers. But in Genesis 16, verse 7, it was the angel of Jah-ol, right? The angel of Jah-ol first found Hagar. Then the angel of the Lord started talking to her in verse 9. And then the angel added, talking to Hagar, I will increase your descendants. Okay, so we have the angel of Jah-ol explicitly telling Hagar he's going to increase her number. And then if we go to chapter 17, we see that Jah-ol, it says only Jah-ol, is the one who's going to increase Abram's numbers. So, is the angel the one increasing Hagar's numbers and Jah-ol increasing Abram's numbers? Or is it all Jah-ol increasing their numbers using the angel? That seems the most consistent explanation to this point. Again, not assuming Trinity. Okay? Verse 3. Abram fell face down, and God said to him, As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, or Avraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. Verse 7, last verse of this reading. And we'll have one more account after this, then we're going to partake and we're done. Okay, we're about an hour and a half in. We should be done before the 2-hour mark. So let's keep going. Verse 7, I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. Okay, so this is either God talking directly to Abraham, he's Abraham now, or it's the angel of Jah-ol, or an angel bringing the words of Ja'ol to Abraham. Those are the only two options without assuming Trinity. All right, now let's go to Genesis 18, our last section and reading from this part 3. Thank you all for joining me. Let's just take a brief look here, see how you guys are doing before we read our last section. Make sure everyone's doing okay. We got a few different people here. Let me just see. A couple people going off on the NIV. Good to see Jason, in addition to everyone else I mentioned. Single cell organism 13. And Keith Hewson. Tarantula clan. Very nice. All right, let's get back to it and finish it up. Part 3, Angels of Ja'ol in Genesis. Let's do it. Chapter 18. This is kind of the big one for tonight. This is where we get the 3 men. Trinitarians love that, right? I'm going to prove this can't be the Trinity. These 3 men, impossible. You ready? Okay, let's go. Genesis 18, 1 through 22. Ja'ol appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. So right here, Ja'ol appearing to Abraham, I believe, makes it impossible for this to be the Father. But let's move on. Verse 2, Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. Verse 3, he said, Abraham, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Verse 4, let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Verse 5, let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way now that you have come to your servant. Very well, they answered, the 3 men. Do as you say. Verse 6, so Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to his servant, who hurried to prepare it. Verse 8, he then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. We often use this account to show, because it goes on to identify at least 2 of these beings as angels, and I'm going to argue all 3. But it shows that angels can take human form and even eat food, like we see Jesus doing in his post-resurrection state, in the New Testament. All right, but saying that aside, verse 9, where is your wife, Sarah? They asked him. There in the tent, he said. Verse 10, then one of them said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. All right, so this one is definitely talking so they can hear, right? Because she can hear. She's listening, and she can hear him. Verse 11, Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. Verse 12, so Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Verse 13, then Ja'ol said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? That's what it called it Ja'ol, whoever's talking. Is anything too hard for Ja'ol? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, Yes, you did laugh. Verse 16, we're going to go to 22. When the men got up to leave, okay? So remember, at the start of our reading, it said Jehovah was appeared to Abraham. And then it said Abraham noticed these three men who then came and started talking to him, right? And then one of them is talking, and then Sarah overhears it talking about her and having a child. And then it says, no, you're going to, she laughs and that whole thing. And now we're right here. Right here it says, the men got up to leave. They looked down toward Sodom, right? So this would have to be all three men, right? It's not separating the men who came, the three men. It just says the men got up to leave. So it doesn't say one was going to stay or the others were going to stay. It goes on to kind of say that, but you'll see. The men got up to leave. They looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way, right? No differentiation. The men, the three men. Verse 17, then Jah said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Verse 18, Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him, to keep the way of Jah by doing what is right and just, so that Jah will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Verse 20. Right, it's Jah having a conversation. It says he's saying this though, right? But he can't be saying it in front of Abraham because they're all with him. So if one of them is saying this out loud, Abraham would hear it. But that's not how it's being presented. It's like Jah is saying it to himself, either while he's with Abraham, if we assume Trinity, or apart from them, and he hasn't yet given his word to those angels yet. Either way, it then says in verse 20, then Jah said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous, you Sodomites. Stop that right now. No more anal stuff. Or, any other perversion. Verse 21, because of all this perversion, okay, because of the Sodomites, I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. Think about that. Think about that text right there, right? Because this is, look at verse 20. Then Jah Epen de Kyrios. Omer Yehwah. Jah said. Okay, so Trinitarians, this is either the Trinity or a person of the Trinity, right? It's one of the three men. It's Jah, right? That's how you see this. I'm going to prove right now that's absolutely impossible. That it's absolutely impossible for this speaker to actually be Jah. Impossible. You ready? So you say this has to be Jah, right? Because to you, there's no way an angel could talk like this, even though that's how they talk from Genesis to Revelation, right? According to Trinity. Angels can't do this. Only the angel of the Lord, the uncreated Jehovah angel, can do this, right? Or Jehovah. Person of the Trinity. No, not possible. You want to know why? Look at it again. Then Jah said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, their sin is so grievous, I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. How could God not already know? What it says right here, this speaker does not know. Trinitarians. I'm sorry, even according to your own view of God, it's not possible for this to be God. And it's not possible for other reasons too, like we've been talking about. But for you, there's no way God couldn't already know if it's as bad as the outcry, right? It's the whole point of the outcry, getting to him, telling him how bad it is, and he's omniscient according to you in every sense of the word. How could he not already know, especially if that's the outcry that's reaching him? Why does God have to go down if he's omnipresent according to you, in the way that you view it, and find out and know and get to know? Right? It even says that. Hina, no. Gamma nu omega, right? It actually is pronounced no, but it's a form of the Greek verb for know, right? Genosko, right? I will know. Sorry, Trinitarians, it's game over. This ends the discussion. It's over. Either you don't believe a person of the Trinity in its his pre-existent state where there's no human nature, all that stuff you do later. No, it says right here, this speaker, whom everything tells us contextually and textually, historically, is an angel speaking for God, the words of Yah'ol, but not Yah'ol, because you can't see and hear Yah'ol. And Yah'ol is not just the Father, or he's not a Trinity, he is just the Father, sorry. And right here, we have further proof that the speaker, whom was earlier identified explicitly as the angel of Yah'ol, has to be an angel. Or God is not who you think he is, right? Trinitarians, which is it going to be? Are you going to surrender omniscience, or are you going to surrender Trinity? Because according to you, all three of the men here in this account, especially this one, right? The one before whom, it even said that, right? In verse 20, it even says that. And according to you and the way you interpret the angel of the Lord and all this stuff, the way they talk, has to be God. Or either that, or you're going to change the whole way you understand Yah'ol speaking directly as God to be like us, right? Which is what you should do. But we very clearly have a problem, don't we? For you Trinitarians. You project nuts. Either God is not omniscient, like we've been telling you in the way that you say he is, but that the Bible doesn't describe because it actually limits God. And our view actually makes him unlimited. Like he's actually able to have control over what he knows, which makes him more capable. According to you guys, he doesn't have any choice. He has to know. Yet this text right here, no. He has to go down and find out, right? So you got no omniscience, you got no omnipresence, and you got no Trinity. None of this affects our doctrine at all, because it is our doctrine. All of it. Verse 22, last verse of this account. The men turned away and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Okay. So we just established there's no way these three men are the three persons of the Trinity. Impossible. Because one of them, at least, if not all of them, because it starts out saying Jehovah appeared to Abraham. Then it says there's three men, and we all know Jehovah appears through angels, right? Just like in Exodus 3, just like elsewhere in the Old Testament, just like in the New Testament, Acts 7, everywhere, all over again. We know one of the three has to find things out, doesn't know, is going to go down and find out. That's incompatible with Trinity. But now we have men turning away and Abraham remaining before Yah'ol. Okay, so are the three men all turning away? Well, let's see. Which version is this? 1822. Let's just see. It looks like these translations here, in terms of whether or not it says 2. Yeah, so it doesn't say 2, it just says the men. But that could be all 3, right? And then somehow Ja'ol is still speaking to Abraham. Or 2 of the men, like some of these translations say, in that Bible, 2, and then 1's remaining. And so Trinitarians would say, yeah, 2 went, and then one of them, the angel of the Lord, or Ja'ol himself, is speaking to Abraham. It says, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord when the men turned away and went to Sodom. Okay, so let's go to verse 27. We're going to skip parts of the account that don't relate to what we're talking about. Then Abraham spoke up again. Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, right? Because what I skipped was where Abraham is negotiating with Ja'ol, or whoever's here, about whether he'll spare Sodom if this many righteous men are left, or this many are left. So Abraham is continuing, verse 28. What if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city? If I find 45 there, he said, I will not destroy it. Verse 29, once again he spoke to him. What if only 40 are found there? He said, for the sake of the 40, I will not do it. Verse 30, then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found? I will not do it if you find 30. Verse 31, Abraham said, now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found? For the sake of the 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found? For the sake of the 10, I will not destroy it. Last verse. When Ja'ol finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. Now, in addition to what we've discussed, just based on the fact that it said 2, or the men, we'll say 2 of the men went to Sodom and Gomorrah of the 3, and 1 remained. We already know one of them clearly can't be a part of the Trinity, at least, because it has to go down, has to find things out, doesn't fit with Trinity and their whole understanding of omnipresence and omniscience. Or being seen and appearing, I would argue. But either way, the 2 that left are identified as angels right after this. And we'll see that as we pick up in part 4 with Genesis 19. So everyone knows the 2 that left are angels. Trinitarians would still say they're, because of that, they relate them to the 3 men, the Trinity, right? Somehow members of the Trinity, the Son and the Holy Spirit. The only other ones that are described angelically in that light. But if the Father is here with Abraham negotiating who's going to be saved, then Abraham is hearing the Father's voice, right? Who else could it be? If this is the Trinity, everybody, the 3 men, and 2 of them are angels that go to Sodom and Gomorrah, according to Genesis 19 and what we just read, the only other one that could be there with Abraham is the Father. Is that not correct? Or is the Father one of the 2 angels that goes to Sodom and Gomorrah? Right? Because the Trinitarians say the 3 men is the Trinity. So we got 2 that are clearly angels and 1 that remains and talks to Abraham. But no one has heard the Father's voice according to Jesus. We'll read that in just a moment. Think about that. Tell me what you think. I'm going to use the restroom real quick. Be right back. We're almost ready to wrap it up. Thank you for joining me. Hang on. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? And the other thing is we're going to see in part 4, and as Genesis 19 goes on to say, okay, so we know that the being talking to Abraham about whether he'll save the city and how many people it would take, we know he hears that being, right? And then the angels that go to Sodom and Gomorrah start talking to Lot. So all 3 of the men who appeared to Abraham are heard. Every single one of them speaks audibly and converses with people. But according to Jesus, right? Bring that up real quickly here. And then we'll wrap this up. So if all 3 voices of the 3 men that appeared were heard, then there's no way excuse me real quick. Go to John 5:37. Bring you guys up here, our last text, and then we're going to partake. We'll be done. John 5:37. It's a verse I've been referring to throughout this evening, where Jesus says, "And the Father who sent me has himself testified concerning me. You have never heard his voice nor seen his form." Now, Trinitarians will sometimes say, well, that he's just talking to them, right? These people haven't seen the Father's voice or heard his form. Okay, well, if that's what you want to do, Trinitarians, again, you can't get away from John 1:18, can you? Every single one of those 3 that we read in our account in Genesis 18 were seen by Abraham and by Lot and by the Sodomites, at least the 2 angels, right? So no one has seen God at any time. All 3 of those beings that appeared to Abraham and to Lot were seen. So there's no way out of this. There's no way out of this. And God himself tells Moses, no one can see me and live. Well, Abraham and Lot are looking directly at these beings while they're talking to them. So there's no caveat. There's no thing that says, well, under these conditions you can see. No. You guys are reading into these things so much of your doctrine that it's just impossible to really get you to see it for what it says. It clearly doesn't present Jah as omnipresent or omniscient in the way that you conceive of him. It directly contradicts your understanding in a way that makes Trinitarianism impossible. And it also doesn't present any one of these 3 beings as anything different than what we were reading from chapters 15, 16, and 17, as the angel of Jah, bringing words of Jah to Avram and others, Hagar and others. So while in some cases that's not explicit, sometimes it says Jah, and sometimes it says angel of Jah, except for NIV, it's still in the context of the speaker talking directly to and appearing before, even to the extent that Sarah says, I've seen God and I'm going to live, right? So there's something, the vision is not like just something ordinary, right? It's something like spectacular that she's seen and says, how am I going to live after this? Same with Manoah and his wife. All of these are involving angels, though. Otherwise, we have a contradiction and a problem with John 1:18 that no one has seen God at any time. There's no way you could argue that these people aren't seeing God, or especially in the case of Manoah and his wife, where the God they've seen is in fire, right? So it only makes sense in the context of the understanding that we've been developing and seeing from Zechariah to Genesis now, where these sons of God, these angels, explicitly speak the words of God in the first person, which is entirely consistent with what we read in the New Testament book of Acts chapter 7, where under inspiration, we are told that when God is speaking, like in Exodus, out of the burning bush, in fire, where Moses is right there looking at him, that was angels. Not just an angel, angels. You don't believe me? Read Acts chapter 7. Okay, then you don't believe the Bible. You believe in Trinity. We believe the Bible. We use the Bible to interpret the Bible. We don't use later doctrine to reinterpret the meanings and uses of all these terms, to come up with a whole new doctrine that just happens to involve the non-use of God's name in large part, especially NIV, and all this bizarre understanding of terms that's contradictory to normal usage and historical thought. So that's why we reject the Trinitarian understanding of the angels of Jah in Genesis and elsewhere. It does not fit the Bible or the context of the text, or even with their own understanding of God, or Jesus, I would argue, or the Holy Spirit. Either way, I believe it's very clear that while not every account we read this evening says it's angels speaking for God, several of them did. And all of those who speak for or as God appeared and were heard by the people to whom they were speaking. So much so that Sarah thought she was going to die, or was amazed she was going to live. Same as Manoah and his wife. It's like something special here. Same with Moses in the burning bush, right? So this idea that somehow they can do this in spite of John 1:18 and other texts that say, no, you can't do that. Not with God. Not if that's really God. Now, if it's an angel, even the angel of Jah, right? Because these are angels. They represent God. And in representing God, they speak and act and are God. Because they're our God and their God, right? They're being the Father to us, just like Jesus did, same thing, right? That's why for us, it's easy to interpret these texts. No Trinity, right? That's why we don't get bothered. When Trinitarians hear all this stuff, it's like, what are you saying? How can you, what? Trinity, creatures? No. They have to come up with all this weird stuff. We don't. We just read the Bible the way it was written and according to the understandings of terms during the time they were written, not later stuff. So I'm very happy that you've all joined me for our part 3 of this discussion of the angels of Jah in Genesis. I think our reading this evening helped make clear things that we've already seen to some extent in parts 1 and 2, but developing it further as these beings continue to interact with humans after the events in Eden. And we continue to get descriptions of them and how they act for and as God, the Father, even though they're not the Father, just like Jesus. Now, what we try to do and have done since show number 2 and show number 1 of the Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion, we realize, we should do our partaking. Some people who partake, they just do it every year, and that's fine. That's not what the Bible says. It doesn't specify how often. It literally says, according to Paul, however often you meet together, this is how you do things. And a lot of people, especially in Watchtower, get all bothered about being unworthy and totally misinterpret what that has to do with, and how you're supposed to eat before and not misuse the emblems in a way that would lead to bad behavior, right? But we know Watchtowers, we talked about in the pre-show, many people, while well-meaning, have a problem with partaking. And so it's difficult for them. Even though it's a very common, basic celebration, it took me a while. But once I understood this is what I had to do in order to represent myself as a Christian, not perfect, but someone who knows what he should do and what I try to do, and to let everyone know, hey, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm not going to partake in all that other stuff, and I'll work with people and do things, and I have my limits, and I'm going to be faithful as I can all the way. And that's why we partake, to let people know, hey, we're serious about this stuff, right? This isn't just a game. We're not just part of a club. I'm not here making money off people. I'm not here earning a living. If anything, I'm probably making those things more difficult and certainly losing opportunities. But to me, this is the most important thing I can do. So when it comes to opportunities, I'm not missing out on anything. And neither are you. If, like me, you proclaim your Christianity by your faith, your works, your repentance where you fail, and by partaking of the emblems that represent Christ's body and blood, given on behalf of the entire world for all those who accept it. Thank you all for joining me as part of our usually weekly live discussion show where we, again, study these things and partake at the end to show our faith and to try to stay close to one another. We know it's hard out there. A lot of people are suffering, but not everybody. And we know that Jah is aware of things. We have to allow things to take place, help out where we can, try to be faithful, encouraging to people, and never be ashamed to confess Jesus as the Christ or Jah as the one God. Try to treat others the way you want to be treated, and where you fail, do better next time. What else can you do, right? Because that is the right way. It's the right way to treat people and to remain above hypocrisy and to try to become more like the Son, and as a consequence, more like the Father. So I thank you all for joining me. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and rest of your weekend. I'll try to be back next weekend if possible. I am planning at least one more live show this year. So pay attention to the notices. Check the community section for updates. And may Jah bless you. In Jesus'